She was the queen of the compound, the mistress of gossip. No secret was safe, until Zina came and showed her that true strength was. You people didn't hear what happened yesterday. Lovetha's voice cut through the morning air like a machete through sugarcane, sharp and impossible to ignore. She stood in the center of the compound, hands on her wide hips, wrapper tied tight around her waist, eyes gleaming with the kind of fire that came from fresh information. The women gathering water at the borehole paused. Some pretended not to hear, but their ears were already stretching like rubber bands. Lovetha smiled. She knew that smile, the one that said she had won before the battle even started. Sister Bola's husband, the one with the form big man. Lovetha's voice dropped to a loud whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the compound. I saw him yesterday night, sneaking through the back gate like common thief. And the woman he was with? She paused for effect, letting the silence do its work. Not his wife, oh. Gasps erupted like fireworks. Buckets clattered against concrete. Lovetha's chest swelled with satisfaction. This was her kingdom, a cramped Lagos compound where 30 families lived pressed together like sardines in a tin. Here, everyone knew everyone's business. But Lovetha, she was the chief broadcasting corporation. CNN, BBC, AIT, nothing compared to her. From who wasn't paying school fees to who was sleeping with whose husband, Lovetha's tongue was faster than Radio Lagos. Her mouth had ended friendships, broken marriages, and turned neighbors into enemies. Yet, people still gathered around her like moths to a flame, drawn to the irresistible pull of other people's shame. Lovetha, you sure saying are true? Mrs. Adeyemi asked, her voice shaking with the delicious horror of it all. Me, am I a liar? Lovetha's eyes widened with false innocence. Ask Mama Trey, she saw them too. Mama Chidi nodded reluctantly. She had seen something, yes, but it was dark, and the man could have been anyone. But Lovetha had a way of making your own eyes doubt what they saw and believe her version instead. The compound buzzed with fresh scandal. Women rushed to spread the news, each adding their own spice to the soup Lovetha had cooked. By afternoon, Sister Bola's husband would be a complete disgrace, his wife a laughingstock, and Lovetha, she would be sitting pretty, feeding on the chaos like it was her daily bread. But Lovetha's reign was built on sand, and the tide was about to come in. That evening, as she found herself outside her room, watching the compound with the eyes of a hawk watching chickens, she noticed the moving chalk. Her body tensed with anticipation. New tenant meant new stories, new secrets to uncover, new soil to dig. A woman stepped out of the chalk, tall, dark-skinned, with quiet eyes that seemed to see everything and judge nothing. She moved with the kind of calm that made Lovetha's skin itch. No fuss, no noise, just smooth, deliberate movements. Good evening, ma, the woman greeted the landlord, her voice soft like evening breeze. Lovetha's eyes narrowed. Something about this woman felt different, wrong, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture she had carefully arranged. Welcome, oh, Lovetha shouted from her perch, loud enough for the newcomer to turn. I am Lovetha, the social prefect of this compound. Anything you want to know, ask me. I know everything and everybody. The woman smiled, a small, polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Thank you, my name is Zina. And just like that, she turned back to her unpacking, as if Lovetha's words were just wind passing through trees. Lovetha felt something cold settle in her stomach. For the first time in years, someone had not jumped at her voice, had not pressed closer to hear more, had not fed her the respect she demanded. She watched Zina disappear into her new room, and somewhere deep in her spirit, a warning bell rang. But Lovetha was too drunk on power to hear it. 3 days passed, and Zina remained a mystery wrapped in silence. She greeted everyone with the same soft smile. She fetched water without joining the gossip sessions at the borehole. She cooked her food, and the aroma of her jollof rice made mouths water, but she didn't invite anyone to taste it. She was polite, pleasant, and completely unreachable. It drove Lovetha mad. Who does this woman think she is? Lovetha complained to Mama Emeka, her closest ally in the compound warfare. Coming here with her quiet attitude like she's better than us. Mama Emeka nodded, but her attention was divided. These days, everyone's attention was divided, because while Lovetha was busy trying to crack Zina's mystery, life in the compound continued its messy dance, and Zina was somehow always there, watching, listening, saying nothing. If you are enjoying this tale of pride and power, subscribe now so you don't miss how this battle unfolds. One afternoon, Mrs. Taiwo came crying to the borehole. Her eyes were red, her wrapper loose around her waist, signs of serious trouble. What happened? Lovetta pounced immediately, nose twitching like a dog catching scent. My husband, he says he's taking a second wife, Mrs. Taiwo sobbed. That useless man, after everything I've done for him. Lovetta's eyes lit up. This was premium content. I knew it. Didn't I tell you people that man was useless? The way he looks at women in this compound, I knew. Did he say why? Zina's voice cut through Lovetta's performance, soft but clear. Everyone turned. Zina stood at the edge of the gathering, bucket in hand, her face showing nothing but gentle concern. Mrs. Taiwo sniffed. He says I don't respect him, that I talk about him to everyone in the compound. A heavy silence fell. Eyes shifted uncomfortably. Because it was true. Mrs. Taiwo had complained about her husband to everyone who would listen, and Lovetta had helped spread those complaints like butter on bread. Maybe, Zina said quietly, you should talk to him first, not us. Some things are too precious to share with everyone. Mrs. Taiwo stared at her, and something shifted in her face. Shame, maybe, or recognition. She wiped her eyes and walked away without another word. Lovetta felt heat rise to her face. What kind of advice is that? The woman is in pain and you are telling her to keep quiet? Zina turned those calm eyes on her. I am telling her that some battles require silence, not noise. Some wounds heal better when they are not exposed to every breeze. And then she walked away, leaving Lovetta standing there with her mouth open, words dying on her tongue. That night, Lovetta couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned on her mattress, the heat pressing down on her like a heavy hand. Through her window, she could hear the compound settling into its evening rhythm. Children crying, couples arguing, generators humming. But louder than all of it was the whisper of doubt in her own mind. For years, she had ruled this compound with her tongue. She was the one people feared, the one they came to for information, the one who held power through secrets and stories. But now, this quiet stranger had walked in and somehow, without raising her voice, without fighting, without even trying, had made Lovetta look small. No, Lovetta whispered to the darkness. I won't let her win. The next morning, Lovetta launched her campaign. She started asking questions about Zina, where she came from, what she did for work, whether she had a husband, why she was so quiet. She needed ammunition, needed something to make Zina seem suspicious, dangerous, worthy of gossip. But Zina gave her nothing. She's a teacher, the landlord said when Lovetta asked. Very respectable woman, paid 6 months' rent in advance. She goes to work early and comes back late, minds her business completely. She helped my son with his homework yesterday, didn't even ask for money, just saw him struggling and offered. Every report made Zina sound more perfect and it made Lovetta's skin crawl. Nobody was this good, nobody was this clean. There had to be something, a crack in the wall, a shadow in the closet. 2 weeks later, Lovetta got her chance. She was returning from the market when she saw Zina talking to a man at the compound gate. They stood close, the man's hand on Zina's arm, their voices low and intimate. Lovetta's heart raced. Finally, evidence, proof that Zina wasn't the saint everyone thought she was. She rushed to Mama Emeka's room. I saw Zina with a man. They were standing very close, whispering like lovers, and you know she claims she's single. Mama Emeka's eyes widened. Are you sure? Would I lie? Lovetta was already crafting the story in her mind, adding details, painting the picture darker and more scandalous. But when she tried to spread the news, something strange happened. People listened, yes, but they didn't react the way they used to. There were no gasps, no rushing to judgment, no fire catching and spreading. Instead, there were questions. Did you hear what they were saying? Maybe it was her brother. Are you sure they were being inappropriate? And then someone said, maybe we should ask Zina directly. Lovetta felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Ask her? She laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. Since when do we ask people directly? That's not how things work. But it was already happening. The compound was changing and Lovetta hadn't noticed until it was too late. Mrs. Taiwo had gone back to her husband, talked to him quietly, and they were working things out without the whole compound knowing every detail. Mama Chidi had stopped sharing her daughter's business after Zina gently suggested that some family matters deserved privacy. Even Mama Emeka had become quieter, more thoughtful, less eager to jump into the gossip pool. And at the center of it all was Zina, never preaching, never judging, just existing in her calm, quiet way that somehow made everyone around her want to be better. The man Lovetta had seen, he was Zina's older brother visiting from Abuja. Zina mentioned it casually to Mrs. Adeyemi, who mentioned it to others, and soon everyone knew. and nobody cared because it was innocent and normal. Lovetta felt something she hadn't felt in years: embarrassment. People started avoiding her. When she began a story, they would nod politely and then drift away. When she called out gossip across the compound, the responses were lukewarm, distracted. The power she had wielded like a weapon was rusting in her hands. One evening, she saw a group of women gathered around Zina's door, laughing and talking. Her stomach twisted with jealousy and confusion. She moved closer, straining to hear. "So what did you do?" Mrs. Adeyemi was asking. Zina's voice was calm, measured. "I told my supervisor exactly what happened. No adding, no removing, just the truth. And you know what? He respected that more than if I had tried to make myself look better or blamed someone else." The women nodded, absorbing her words like dry ground drinking rain. Lovetta realized with growing horror what was happening. Zina wasn't fighting her. Zina wasn't even acknowledging that there was a battle. She was simply being herself, honest, calm, discreet, and people were drawn to that like they had once been drawn to Lovetta's chaos. But there was a difference. When people came to Lovetta, they came hungry for scandal, ready to tear others down, eager to feel superior by standing on someone else's shame. When they went to Zina, they came seeking peace, looking for wisdom, hoping to be better versions of themselves. Lovetta walked back to her room, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. Inside, she looked at herself in the cracked mirror hanging on her wall. Really looked, and for the first time in years, she didn't like what she saw. Her face was hard, her eyes suspicious, her mouth set in a permanent snare. When had she become this person? When had she traded kindness for cruelty, peace for power, respect for fear? That night, she lay in bed and remembered herself as a young woman, newly married, moving into this compound with hope in her heart. She remembered how the older women had welcomed her, included her, made her feel like family. When had she forgotten that warmth? When had she decided that tearing others down was better than building them up? The next morning, Lovetta's friend Giwa came to visit. They had known each other for 20 years, survived poverty together, raised children side by side. If anyone would tell her the truth, it was Giwa. "Giwa," Lovetta said, her voice smaller than usual. "Am I a bad person?" Giwa looked at her for a long moment. "You are not bad, Lovetta, but you've been cruel. There's a difference." The words landed like stones in water, sending ripples through Lovetta's heart. "Everyone is talking," Giwa continued gently. "They say Zina has shown them what real strength looks like. Not noise, not knowing everyone's secrets, just being steady, being trustworthy, being kind." "She hasn't done anything special," Lovetta protested weakly. "She just minds her business." "Exactly," Giwa smiled sadly. "And somehow, that's more powerful than everything you've been doing all these years." After Giwa left, Lovetta sat alone in the gathering darkness. Outside, she could hear the compound coming alive, children playing, women cooking, men returning from work. This place had been her kingdom, her stage, her source of power and identity. But kingdoms built on other people's pain don't last. Stages built on mockery eventually collapse, and power that comes from fear, it's just a shadow that disappears when real light arrives. Zina was that light, quiet, steady, impossible to extinguish, and Lovetta was the shadow, finally seeing herself for what she truly was. The question was, could a shadow learn to become light? Sunday morning came with the smell of jollof rice and the sound of church bells. Lovetta dressed slowly, her movements heavy with the weight of the past weeks. She hadn't slept well in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of people she had hurt. Sister Bola, avoiding her eyes at the borehole. Mrs. Taiwo, whose marriage she had nearly destroyed. Mama Chidi's daughter, who had left the compound because everyone knew her business. The list was long, too long. At the compound meeting that afternoon, Lovetta sat in her usual spot, front and center, where she could see and be seen. But this time, she felt like an intruder in her own kingdom. The landlord stood up. "We have some issues to discuss. First, the water bill." "Excuse me, sir." Zina's voice was soft but clear. "Can I say something?" The landlord nodded. Zina stood, and Lovetta's body tensed. This was it. This was where Zina would expose her, embarrass her in front of everyone, take her final victory. "I want to thank everyone for welcoming me," Zina began. "I know I'm still new here, and I'm still learning how this compound works, but I've noticed something beautiful." Lovetta frowned. Where was this going? I've noticed that when we support each other, when we keep each other's secrets safe, when we speak with kindness instead of judgment, we all become stronger. Not weaker, stronger. Heads nodded around the compound. I grew up in a place where gossip destroyed my family. My mother, she made one mistake, just one, and the whole community made it their daily bread. They talked and talked until the shame killed her spirit. She's alive, but she's not really living. Silence fell like a heavy cloth over the gathering. So when I came here, I promised myself, I will never be the reason someone's spirit dies. I will never be the mouth that spreads pain. Zina's eyes swept across the crowd, landing briefly on Lovetta. Not with anger, not with judgment, with something that looked almost like compassion. We all have secrets. We all have shame. We all have moments we wish we could hide. But we also all have the power to choose. Do we protect each other's dignity, or do we trade it for entertainment? Lovetta felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, cracking, like an egg that's about to birth something new. After the meeting, people gathered around Zina, thanking her, sharing their own stories of how gossip had hurt them. Lovetta watched from a distance, her throat tight with emotions she couldn't swallow. You should talk to her. Lovetta turned. Giwa stood beside her, eyes kind but firm. And say what? Sorry I've been a terrible person for 20 years? Start with sorry. The rest will follow. That night, Lovetta stood outside Zina's door for 10 minutes before she found the courage to knock. Come in, Zina called. The room was simple, clean and filled with books. So many books. Lovetta had never seen so many books in one room outside a library. Lovetta, Zina smiled, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. Lovetta's mouth was dry. I wanted to... The words stuck in her throat like bones. Zina waited, patient like a river. Finally, it burst out. Why didn't you fight me? Zina tilted her head. Fight me? For what? For the compound, for respect, for power. Lovetta's hands waved wildly. I was trying to make people hate you, trying to find your secrets, trying to push you out. And you just kept being nice. Why? Zina was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up and pulled a book from her shelf. Old, worn, and a cracked spine. My grandmother gave me this before she died. It's full of proverbs and wisdom. There's one I read every morning. She opened to a marked page and read, A tree that grows beside the river doesn't need to fight the drought. It just keeps drinking from the source. Lovetta stared at her. You thought we were fighting, Zina said. But I wasn't fighting you, Lovetta. I was just trying to be myself. And my source is peace, kindness, truth. As long as I keep drinking from that, drought can't touch me. Storms can't shake me. But I hurt people, Lovetta whispered, and suddenly tears were streaming down her face. Hot, shameful tears that she hadn't cried in years. I've hurt so many people with my mouth. I've destroyed reputations, broken friendships, caused pain. And I told myself it was just fun, just compound talk, just the way things are. But it wasn't. It was cruel. Zina moved closer, and to Lovetta's shock, she placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The fact that you can see that now, Zina said, that's not weakness. That's strength. Real strength. How do I fix it? Lovetta looked up, desperate. How do I undo all the damage? You can't undo the past, but you can change the future. One word at a time. One kind action at a time. One moment of choosing silence instead of spreading pain. Lovetta wiped her face with her wrapper. I don't know if I can change. This is who I've been for so long. Who you've been is not who you have to be, Zina said. I believe in second chances, in new beginnings, don't you? The next morning, Lovetta awoke before dawn. She sat outside her room as the compound slowly came to life, watching the sky change from black to purple to orange. The sounds were familiar. Roosters crowing, babies crying, water splashing, but somehow they sounded different, cleaner, like she was hearing them for the first time. Mrs. Adeyemi passed by with her bucket. Good morning, Lovetta. Usually, Lovetta would have grabbed her, asked about her husband's late-night movements, dug for information to store and spread later. But today, she just smiled. "Good morning, ma. How is your family?" Mrs. Adeyemi stopped, surprised. They are fine. Thank you for asking." And that was all. No probing, no digging. Just a simple, kind exchange. It felt strange. It felt uncomfortable. It felt good. At the borehole, the women gathered as usual. Mama Emeka started a story about Sister Bola's house girl stealing meat from the pot. Old Lovetta would have jumped in, added spice, turned it into a full scandal. New Lovetta bit her tongue. "Maybe we should hear Sister Bola's side first," she heard herself say, "before we judge." The silence was deafening. Women stared at her like she had grown a second head. "Are you feeling okay?" Mama Emeka touched her forehead, checking for fever. Lovetta laughed, a real laugh, not the sharp mocking sound she usually made. "I'm fine. I'm just trying something different." The change didn't happen overnight. Old habits fought hard to survive. There were days when Lovetta caught herself about to spread a rumor, about to add her commentary to someone's private cane. But each time, she remembered Zina's words, remembered her mother's face in that mirror, remembered the kind of person she wanted to become. Slowly, relationships began to heal. Sister Bola started greeting her again. Mrs. Taiwo invited her for lunch. Even the young women who had avoided her began to relax in her presence. One evening, 3 months after Zina arrived, Lovetta found herself in the middle of a different kind of gathering. The women sat in Mama Chidi's room, but instead of tearing someone down, they were building someone up. Mrs. Adeyemi's daughter had won a scholarship, and they were planning a small celebration. "Lovetta, can you help with the decorations? You are so creative," Mrs. Taiwo asked. Lovetta felt warmth spread through her chest. They were asking for her help, not her gossip, her help. "Of course," she said, and meant it. Later, walking back to her room, she passed Zina sitting outside reading under the security light. "Thank you," Lovetta said. Zina looked up. "For what?" "For showing me that there's another way to live, for not giving up on me even when I was terrible to you, for being patient when I didn't deserve patience." Zina closed her book and smiled. That same calm, gentle smile that had frustrated Lovetta so much when they first met. But now, Lovetta understood. It wasn't arrogance or superiority. It was peace. Real, deep, unshakable peace. "We all need someone to show us the way sometimes," Zina said. "I'm just glad you are ready to see it." "You know what the funny thing is, Lovetta?" I sat down beside her. "I thought power came from knowing everyone's secrets, from being loud, from making people fear me. But real power, the kind you have, it comes from being trustworthy, from being steady, from making people feel safe instead of afraid." "It's not power," she corrected gently. "It's influence, and influence built on love lasts longer than power built on fear." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the compound settle into sleep. Children were called inside, lights flickered off one by one, the generator hummed its nightly song. "Zina," I asked after a while, "do you think people can really change, completely?" Zina looked at me with those calm, knowing eyes. "I think people can choose to change, and every day they keep choosing, they become a little more of who they want to be and a little less of who they were. Change isn't a destination, Lovetta. It's a journey, and you're already on the road." 6 months later, the compound had transformed. Not in any dramatic way. The buildings were still cramped, the water still had to be rationed, the generator still failed too often, but the spirit of the place had changed. People spoke more kindly, they protected each other's privacy, they supported instead of criticizing. And Lovetta, she became known for something new: wisdom. Not the destructive kind that comes from knowing everyone's shame, but the healing kind that comes from having walked through shame yourself and come out the other side. Young women came to her for advice now, not to hear gossip, but to get guidance, and Lovetta gave it freely, honestly, without using their secrets as currency. One day, a new tenant moved in, a young woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, asking questions, digging for information, looking for the compound's weak spots. Lovetta recognized herself in that hungry face. She walked over, smiled, and said, "Welcome, I'm Lovetta. If you need anything, let me know." And just a piece of advice from someone who learnt the hard way: the fastest way to make enemies in this compound is to carry people's matter on your head like a load of firewood. But the best way to make friends: mind your business, protect their secrets, and remember that everyone here is fighting battles you can't see. The young woman blinked, surprised. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Lovetta said with a knowing smile. "Thank me when you realize I just saved you years of regret." As the woman walked away, Zina appeared beside Lovetta. "Look at you, teaching what you've learnt." "I had a good teacher," Lovetta said. "No," Zina shook her head. "You had a willing heart. That's all any teacher can ask for." That evening, as the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Lovetta stood in the center of the compound, not as a queen anymore, but as something better. A friend, a neighbor, a woman who had looked her worst self in the face and chosen to become something new. The compound didn't fear her anymore, but they respected her, they trusted her, and in the quiet moments of the evening when families gathered and stories were shared, Lovetta finally understood what Zina had been trying to show her all along. The greatest power isn't in knowing everyone's secrets, it's in being someone who can be trusted with them and choosing to protect them instead of exploit them. If this story touched your heart and taught you something valuable, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more African folktales that teach, inspire, and transform. Because wisdom shared is wisdom multiplied, and our stories have the power to change lives, one tale at a time. Which character did you relate to most, Lovetta or Zina? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.